1. Every year, my wife and I make an annual trip to the Pacific Northwest. We live in Texas and generally drive the round trip, 4,200-mile journey in the period of 2 weeks. I'm a ham radio operator, and my trucks are always outfitted with 3 radios. An HF radio, I call my C7000, a Kenwood TM-D7110, combo VHF and UHF, and a PRS, and a CB Cobra 40 channel. I also run a combination of digital trunking and analog scanners. I'm that weird guy with a ton of antennas on his truck. Back in July 2014, my wife and I made our usual trip to Seattle, the Olympic National Park, and headed down to California to catch a Dodgers game before going through Arizona to see the Diamondbacks before finally heading back to Texas. My wife and I are avid baseball fans and try to time our 2-week vacation so we can see the Rockies Mariners, a California team, and the Diamondbacks during the trip. After leaving Los Angeles around 10 p.m., I headed east towards Phoenix on I-10. Somewhere around 12:30 a.m. I was approaching Chiricahua Summit, and heard chatter on the national 70 cm simplex frequency, 446 MHz. I keyed up, announced my call sign, and asked for a signal report. Not 4 seconds later, I heard my own voice coming back, though the signal was greatly degraded. Words can't describe the strange feeling I had. I've been a ham since I was 12 years old and have never heard anything like that in my life. I was transmitting simply point to point. My radio was communicating on one frequency to anyone who can hear it. I heard of long-delayed echoes in the past, but I've never had personal experience with them and didn't know a ham that did. The 2 ham radio operators that I chatted with for about 5 minutes confirmed they heard the long delay echoes. One older operator was particularly disturbed by what he heard, as he noted that the repeat of my voice was much clearer than what I reported. The younger operator, who was also on the channel, reported the echo was greatly degraded also. From my estimation, the ham radio operators I talked to were 5 to 7 miles of my location before I lost contact with them. During the entire conversation, my degraded and slightly modulated voice was repeating approximately every 3 to 4 seconds. Basically, my voice echoed over approximately 5 to 7 mile range, and 2 other ham radio operators independently verified they heard the echo with varying degrees of signal quality. This is not normal. I spent the rest of the night driving to Phoenix, thinking about what could have caused it. My mind went first to some odd equipment malfunction, but I managed to talk to a few VHF and UHF repeaters the rest of the evening, and never heard the echo again. I ruled out equipment and tried to enjoy the rest of my vacation. While in Phoenix, I got on a local UHF repeater and talked with some fellow hams about my experience the night before. One simply didn't believe it happened, another 20 questioned me, and a third said his dad heard something similar on 80 meters, 3.5 to 4.0 MHz during the 1960s. After I got back to Texas, I paid an older friend of mine with an electrical engineering degree with a focus in telecommunications to test out my radio and tear it down. I didn't tell him specifically what I was looking for, I just wanted his professional opinion as to whether the radio was operating within spec. He kept the radio a week and reported back that the radio was in excellent condition and worked as it should. At this point, I told him what happened in California with the long-delayed echoes. Needless to say, he was dumbfounded and didn't have any answers that helped me sleep any better at night. It's been almost 5 years since this occurred, and I haven't encountered a long-delayed echo again. Every chance I get, I ask hams if they've experienced this specific phenomena, and so far, I haven't found any that have personal experience on any frequency band, let alone the 70 cm band. While there are various hypotheses on precise how and when long-delayed echoes occur, most of the theories that have some solid basis in science are regulated to frequencies between 1 and 30 MHz. The long-delayed echoes I heard occurred at 446 MHz, which makes what I heard even more strange. Going out on an intellectual limb, these strange echoes could be partially affected by the sun interacting with the Earth's magnetosphere, but the jury's still out on exactly how these strange echoes occur, especially on the frequency that I was operating on that very strange July night. Either way, in mind, I continue to classify long-delayed echoes and unexplained phenomena. 2. I teach culinary arts at a rural high school. The school has an attached theater that has long had a reputation for being haunted. I have been to this school now for 4 years, and until today I haven't had any really odd experiences. This would of course depend on what you describe as an odd experience. Since my job sometimes requires me to be at work earlier than usual, since I sometimes need to do prep work to get the kitchen ready for each class, I have been at school as early as 5 a.m. At 5 a.m. when the world outside is still dark, my culinary arts kitchen is an oasis of light and sound. The first thing I do each morning is to transfer culinary jackets, bib aprons, and sanitizer cloths from the kitchen's washing machine to the dryer. While the dryer is rumbling, I brew a pot of coffee and take a few moments to make breakfast for myself. As shredded potatoes hiss on the stove and buttermilk biscuits rise in the oven, I bustle about the kitchen, putting away kitchen tools that were washed and air-dried on drying racks by my 6th period class. I find morning routines to be very comforting. They don't require a lot of effort, and while I work on each task, I can focus on what I'll be doing with each class. On at least 4 separate occasions while working in the kitchen long before the school has opened, I've heard a voice in the kitchen. Each experience has been the same, a soft voice that sounds like a young girl says, "Chef." When I looked to see who spoke to me, no one else was in the kitchen. There was no one in the connecting classroom. The doors in the kitchen and classroom leading to an exterior hallway have also been shut and locked. Each time this has happened, I've mentally shrugged and told myself that I must be hearing things. I am now rethinking this. Today, while I was in the kitchen before school, someone opened the connecting door to the classroom. "Hello?" I called. The door paused and didn't open all the way. After a moment, it swung shut. I went into the classroom to see who was there. The classroom was empty. Both doors leading to the hallway were closed and locked. For a moment I wondered if the door had been propped open, and if the door wedge had given way so that the door shut. The problem is, I remember closing the door after entering the kitchen. When I checked the door, I also found that the door wedge was missing. Since I know that my principal believes that the school is haunted, I wrote a brief description of this experience and sent it off via email. I was surprised that she popped by after school. It seems that one of the office clerks, who has long scoffed at the thought of ghosts, had an experience last night in the culinary arts kitchen. The junior high, who share the high school, had some sort of event last night. The office staff came to my class to get chairs for the parents. While the clerk was passing the open connecting door to the kitchen, she saw a man in the kitchen. The stranger had walked across the kitchen to stand in front of the freezer. Since she didn't recognize him, she panicked and ran to the office to get the principal. The principal and 3 other people came back with her. When they entered the kitchen, there was no one there, but the principal and the clerk jumped when a blurred something suddenly streaked across the floor. The principal said it looked like a mist, while the clerk wondered if it was a rat. The principal then showed me a picture on her cell phone. The vice principal sent a picture of the lit stage with a text message saying that he was in the theater. He didn't realize it at the time, but his picture included what appears to be a ghostly head and the upper torso of a woman hovering off to one side of the stage. 3. When I was 16, I got a job as a personal assistant and cleaning lady for a very wealthy couple who lived in a big, beautiful mansion on Lake Michigan. It was a great job at the time, but after a while I had to quit because of everything going on, and I'll tell you exactly what that was. I made $12 an hour as a 16-year-old girl, and that was just crazy to me at the time. But now I know it's because the homeowners couldn't get anyone to stay and work for them. It could very well be because they're both major assholes, but I honestly didn't see them all that much during the school year, so it was fine. I would work 40-hour weeks in the summer and part-time while I was in school. So during the school year, I would hardly ever see the homeowners and would be left alone to clean the house. I had a key, alarm code, and gate code, so I let myself in and out. In the summer months, I had help from a few other employees, but in the school year I did not. At first I loved being in the house by myself, don't get me wrong. The place was absolutely gorgeous. Right on Lake Michigan, so I'd always open all the curtains to let the sunlight in, and blast the surround sound speakers while I cleaned. It wasn't until I was by myself that I started noticing how weird the place was. Nothing ever exactly felt welcoming about the place. Sure, it was pretty to look at, but it was modern and everything was hard marble and stone. Not a very homey feeling. My first experience happened when I was cleaning one day in silence. I remember specifically not turning on the music because I had a bad headache that day. All of a sudden, the speaker to the upstairs part of the house turned on. The way their speaker system works, you can control it by a touchpad in the kitchen, which would play the music everywhere besides the basement and master bedroom. To play music in those areas, you have to go to that touchpad and turn it on by the control pad and sync it up with the rest of the house. The reason this was so alarming was because I was the only one there. I walked up the stairs to go check out what was going on and figure out why the music turned on, seemingly by itself. I looked around and called out the homeowner's name, thinking someone just came in without me noticing or something. But the doors were all still locked and no one was home. I shut off the music and went back downstairs, not thinking much of it. It started happening more often. I'd be listening to music and it would turn off, or it would be off and would turn on in a completely different area of the house. I brushed it off as faulty and didn't think much of it. The second most prevalent story I remember from working there was when I was cleaning the workout room in their basement. I never wanted to go in this room, and I really couldn't tell you why. Something about this room was weird. It was super cold and dark, and I just felt really anxious in that room. I definitely tried to avoid it, but my boss would get mad when dust would build up, so I forced myself to go in there once a week to tidy up. So anyway, I was in the workout room using a broom and a mop. I remember sweeping up the floor and propping the broom against a machine while I used the mop. Suddenly the broom fell over, hitting the wall, the baseboard, and the floor as it fell, causing 3 distinct knocks. What I heard after scared me so badly I refused to go into the room by myself ever again. Immediately following the knocks made by the broom falling, 3 knocks responded in the exact same pattern the broom fell, but it was coming from inside the wall. I know what you're thinking, but no, it was not an echo. It was not a scared animal. It was knocking, deliberate knocking. I was completely alone in a big quiet house in the middle of nowhere, and someone is knocking back at me from inside the wall. To this day, I have absolutely no explanation for what I experienced. Lastly, this was the first and only time I've ever seen anything paranormal with my 2 eyes. And I know this time it's not me being paranoid or crazy, because I was with a co-worker who saw it too. Sometimes my boss would rent out her guest house and we would clean it before the guests arrived. So this guest house has a glass hallway leading from one main area of the house to another. I was cleaning the glass while one of my co-workers, Bob, was standing next to me talking. Just then I catch a glimpse of what looked like a boy in a blue shirt running by. I turned my head just as Bob turned his head as well. He asked me if I saw that too, and I said yes. 4. I'm currently 23 years old, and I still clearly remember this from when I was just a toddler, around 5 years of age. I'm very skeptical when it comes to the paranormal. I don't believe in ghosts or such, but this one particular incident freaked me out once I remembered it just a couple of days ago. You may or may not believe me when I tell you this story, but I could swear on anything that is dear to me that this did in fact happen. I was just a small kid, like I said, dealing with my parents arguing with each other. Eventually they divorced the following year, which I was very disturbed from hearing them shout at each other from the other side of the bedroom door whenever I tried to go to sleep at night. To stop their fighting, I would ask them if I could sleep in their bed. I slept for around half a year in their bed, always in the middle between them. So far, nothing bizarre had happened. In the comfort of being in the middle of my 2 parents and the bedsheet covers, I had always felt very safe. However, I remembered recently a moment where I stopped having that feeling from a certain point as a kid. My parents' room had a small mirror pinned to the wall, with a very specific frame that looked like the spade symbol from playing cards. Brown frame and at the height of an average adult's face when standing. It was pinned to the wall that was on my left side when in bed, on the right side when one enters the room, and the bed is facing the entrance. This happened more than once, in the middle of the night while I was feeling content that I was getting some good sleep. I would wake up for no reason at all. I would simply wake up, but wouldn't feel dazed at all. But my instincts fired up once I saw what I thought should be my mind playing a trick on me. If it was, it really would have made me feel a lot better about the situation. Unfortunately, that really wasn't the case. I would wake up and see that the mirror in the wall, was upside down. The spade symbol-shaped mirror was now pointing downwards. No one would move that mirror before going to bed. I certainly couldn't reach it, and my parents didn't even pay that much attention to it at all. Once I noticed this in the middle of the night, I got scared for a bit. But since I was protected from both sides by my parents, I quickly dismissed this and went back to sleep. And once I would wake up, the mirror was back to its original position. I honestly couldn't fathom what was going on at the time. And this happened a couple more times as well. Wake up at night, see the mirror flipped, go back to sleep. Wake up and the mirror was back to normal. And I can surely tell you, this was not a dream. I can very clearly distinguish dreams from reality. And I know till this day that it wasn't a dream. Whatever was going on, it wasn't that bad as some other stories. But this was unnerving enough, and my chest felt heavy once it did. This all happened at my old house that my grandma just moved out of. My parents lived with my maternal grandparents at the time. I'm going to see my parents again soon. I'm studying abroad, and tell them this story. Maybe they know something about the house that I don't. 5. Ever since my family, wife and 2 young boys, moved into our new apartment, my wife and I have been hearing things. The first was a babyish giggle that sounded nothing like our 18-month-old. When our youngest was asleep in our bedroom, the giggle sounded like it was coming from 2 opposite walls, and the roof of the living room, which we were sitting in at the time. After that, we would hear giggling fairly regularly, but never really made anything of it. Sure, it may have sounded like it was coming from inside our apartment, but it's a big complex, and sound travels in strange ways. Then came the footsteps at night, which only ever came when I was in my deepest sleep cycle. But they were so clear I'd wake up in a daze, and rationalize it away with completely nonsensical mid-sleep logic. It's probably just my dad here to visit his grandkids. Back to sleep. That was my first sleep-ridden instinct the first time I half woke up to it. I'd say the footsteps happened 3 times on 3 different nights, and after the 4th time, my wife finally asked if I heard it. My shocked response was, "That was real?" It sounded like clump, clump, clump with a hardwood creak on clump number 3. Yep, always clump number 3. And it sounds like a large man, like it's not loud, but the sound really carries. Yep, it sounds like a large man trying to stay quiet while walking in timberlands. And then it's gotta stand still at the corner of both bedrooms so it can see everyone. Yep, right at the corner of our bedroom and AJ's, our oldest son's room that shares a wall with our bedroom. I know, it always stops there, like it came from the kitchen or living room and stops right there. Then came the living room toys. Motion-activated baby toys would turn on randomly from the living room. Every night my wife and I would rationalize it away with, "Stupid dog." We spent months passively blaming the dog until one night, we're sleeping away and on comes the Spanish Colors song from one of the toys. Ugh, that freaking dog, no way am I getting up for this shit. If the wife wants to deal with it, she can feel free, but I'm just gonna keep my eyes closed until it shuts off on its own. Eventually the music stops and I fall back asleep. Later that night, I hear the sound of a metal cage rattling. "Horse, what the fuck are you doing with the dog crate?" "What? How are you in bed?" "What do you mean? What's going on?" Clump with a hardwood creak from the spot, even though we're all in bed. The cage stops rattling. My wife flips her phone's flashlight on and shines it at the dog crate. The dog is in a laying position, yawning as though she's just got woken up. Whenever the dog moves around in the crate, It's the sound of claws scraping plastic and the occasional light individual cage rattle. This sounded exactly how it sounds when my son messes with the dog crate, where he grabs the cage and rattles the closed door. Both myself and my wife were and are absolutely positive it wasn't the dog. Then it occurred to us. Ever since we moved in, we've been locking the dog in her crate in our bedroom every night because it was a new home. We were used to the idea of the dog being able to roam free at night from our old apartment, but in practice, we were quite militant about locking her in the crate every night. Clearly it wasn't the dog tripping over the baby toys in the middle of the night. I'm pretty sure I saw it the other night. I was laying on the living room couch watching shows on my propped-up phone around midnight when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a dim flashlight coming from down the hallway. I looked over, ready to tell my wife to stop being annoying, even though I fully knew deep down that it wasn't her. My mentality. I figured I'd tack on a little aside about my train of thought in regards to witnessing this type of shit. At this point, I'm fully aware that there's something, and I need to stop brushing off and tuning out mentally when something presents itself. This entire experience has been almost funny in an ironic way. Ghost stories, documentaries, and movies always manage to condense it down to the action scenes, and this story is no different. If you were to break my emotions down into segments, it would be 90% mundane, 80% mildly annoyed confusion, and 2% actual fear. The other 90% chunk of the story you don't hear is all false flags, a thump or thud that makes one wonder, was that the ghost? Question, simple investigation, plausible deniability. Oh, okay, the dog was in that room, or the baby was crawling away from the room. It's as though you repeat the process of hearing something suspicious and investigating only to find a normal explanation, that the cycle creates doubt for when you do hear something legitimately strange, with no explanation. Thus, you ask yourself, did that really just happen? Am I crazy or something? Maybe I just thought I saw something, or maybe it was just my eyes adjusting. When I looked over, I saw a glowing light moving along the walkway from the bedrooms to the kitchen, slowly. It looked like a white warning light in extreme fog. The light glowed in a 3-foot radius, but no light made it beyond that point. There was a short, shadowy figure behind it. It looked as though it was holding the light in its hand, but at the same time, it also looked like it was holding the light in its mouth. The shadow creature was like a horribly drawn humanoid shape I could barely see. It was moving in a straight line from left to right. Once it made it to the end of the wall that separates the kitchen from the living room, it moved away from me and into the kitchen as it faded into nothing. It was as though the act of changing direction made it turn invisible, or just fade back into another dimension, literally. Logic? The most surreal aspect of all this is how much logic and how little emotion or attitudes have involved in the matter. Feels always seem to be the most prevalent theme in paranormal encounters. I swear on my life that when I started to notice the strange light, my first thought was, let me remain calm so I can mentally document this as accurately and professionally as possible. I'm gonna pretend like I'm at work and I'm documenting a software bug, because I know that if I don't, it'll just fade away and I'll forget about it, deny it and lose all memory of it. There was no panic. It was like filing a tech support ticket on behalf of a customer, which is exactly the attitude I wanted to assume. Conclusion? I've never been scared and I think they're friendly. I have no way to prove it other than the fact that I just flat out don't get bad vibes from any of it. I've never actually felt scared or threatened, nor has my wife. Surprised and startled? Absolutely. But just an initial jump scare and oh, it's just the freaking ghosts, whatever. It's almost sentimental to me at this point. I feel connected to the man and the child in some way. We're a loving family and our kids are totally spoiled. They have 1,000,001 toys, so they neglect the 1,000,000 just to play with the one. I'm not sure if the child spirit is a boy or girl, but it's clearly trying to play with my younger son's toys while the father patrols from kitchen to bedrooms at night, just as I do during the day. I feel no reason to look for any answers, and I'm not sure if attempting communication would be a good idea or not. If anything, I'd just like to tell the father to take good care of everyone, that we're happy with the way things are, and for his child to enjoy the toys. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 140. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Right, now we've had a little bit of sun today. Tomorrow, technically a day off, but it's also a work day. It's confusing, but it makes sense to me. I do have to hop down to the hospital to pick up my next batch of icky stuff, and I'm just hoping the sun's out for it, because it is actually nice walking home when the sun's out. Get the sun about me, enjoy the nice hot weather. So fingers and toes crossed. Well, don't cross your toes, you'll fall over if you cross your toes. That would be very, very bad. But hopefully it will be sunny and shiny. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.